In a quiet corner house in Guthrie, Oklahoma, Louis Fryer spent 15 years raising his daughter, Callie, with all the love of a single father. He stayed up late checking her homework, woke up early to make breakfast, and was always ready to lend a listening ear. But Louis never expected that when he forbade her from dating Jerry, a 21-year-old man. His effort to protect his daughter from what he considered a harmful relationship would lead Coley to see her father as an obstacle to be removed. She manipulated her boyfriend, convincing Jerry that killing Louis was the only way for them to find happiness. On the night of May 13, 2010, Jerry Chills snuck into the Fryer home and fatally stabbed Louis with a knife from the very kitchen where the devoted father once cooked for his daughter every morning. As Louis bled to death, Callie lay still in the next room, waiting for her father's final breath. Why did a devoted father meet such a tragic end? What conflict drove a 15-year-old girl to so ruthlessly murder her own father? In the early 2000s, Guthrie, Oklahoma, was a tranquil small town with tree-lined streets, wide porched wooden houses, and the sound of children's laughter echoing through playgrounds. This was the place Louis Keith Fryer Jr. chose to build a life and raise his children after a painful divorce in 1997. At 42, Louis Fryer was widely seen as the model of a devoted single father. Though not physically imposing, he exuded a warmth and trustworthiness that endeared him to his neighbors. Louis had a big heart, often helping out in the community, and, above all, he poured his energy into his two children, Keith and Callie, to his eldest son. Louis was more than just a father. He was a perfect role model, a man Keith admired and aspired to be. Yet, while Keith was close to and empathetic with his father, Callie, his 15-year-old younger sister, was heading in a completely different direction. On the surface, Callie maintained the innocent demeanor of a young teenager, but behind her family's back, she plunged into a world of partying, alcohol, and drugs. Her rebellious behavior quickly led to consequences. She was disciplined and then expelled from school. When the truth came out, Louis was both shocked and disappointed, with the responsibility of a father. He tried to control his daughter by setting a series of strict rules and boundaries, believing it would keep her safe and get her back on track. But this strictness only deepened the rift between father and daughter. Callie became more withdrawn and secretive. In her private journal, she poured out her rage and hatred toward the father who was trying his best to love and protect her. In her isolation, Callie fell into the arms of Jerry Jerome Chills Jr., a 21-year-old with no stable employment. To her, Jerry offered the sense of freedom and rebellion she craved. To outsiders, however, this was a forbidden relationship, a 15-year-old girl caught up in her first love with a man 6 years her senior. When this secret was eventually exposed, it would become the spark that ignited an unthinkable tragedy. The truth about Callie and Jerry's relationship couldn't be hidden forever. When Louis discovered that his 15-year-old daughter was dating a 21-year-old man, his reaction was predictable. This was not just a matter of an age gap. Under Oklahoma law, the relationship was illegal. Louis, driven by his paternal protective instincts, vehemently forbade it. The conversation between father and daughter was tense. Louis tried to explain the dangers and legal consequences she could face. He worried not only for her future, but also that Jerry, an unstable young man, might take advantage of her naivety. But Louis's pleas only pushed Callie further away. Instead of listening, she became more rebellious and defiant. Her repeated school suspensions and increasingly challenging attitude left Louis feeling helpless, not content with just talking to his daughter. Louis decided to confront Jerry directly. The meeting was fraught with tension, a father trying to protect his child, and a young man who felt threatened. Louis demanded that Jerry end the relationship with Callie, emphasizing that it was not only morally wrong, but also illegal. The confrontation did not yield the results Louis hoped for. Instead, it created an irreparable, hostile distance. For Callie, her father's intervention was no longer an expression of love, but an unacceptable form of control. In the mind of a 15-year-old full of emotions and lacking life experience, Louis was no longer a devoted father, but the number one enemy blocking her happiness. From this thought, a brutal idea began to form. If she couldn't change her father, she would eliminate him. But to turn this idea into reality, Callie needed someone to carry it out, and Jerry was her only choice. However, convincing someone to commit murder is not simple, no matter how much they love you. Callie needed a powerful enough motive to make Jerry willing to cross every moral boundary. She found the perfect psychological weapon. She lied to Jerry that she was pregnant. This lie was not just a detail in her plan, but the key to the entire conspiracy. It transformed Louis from a father trying to protect his child into a villain, preventing a young family from being happy. In Jerry's mind, removing Louis was no longer a crime, but a righteous act to protect the woman he loved and their unborn child. Callie had skillfully manipulated Jerry, turning his love into a tool to execute her vicious plan. Once Jerry was convinced, Callie began to meticulously plan the murder. She left nothing to chance. Every detail was carefully calculated. The back door would be left open for Jerry to sneak in. The location of the knife in the kitchen was specified, and after the mission was complete, Jerry would take the wallet, car keys, and other items to create a cover-up for a robbery. Louis's car would be used for the escape, and then abandoned in Oklahoma City to distance the crime from the scene. The meticulousness of the plan showed the depth of hatred Callie felt for her father. This was not the impulsive act of a rebellious teenager, but a conspiracy that had been carefully nurtured and prepared. While Louis was still trying to salvage his relationship with his daughter, Callie had already finalized the plan to end his life. Around 3 a.m. on May 13, 2010, the brutal plan was finally put into action. Jerry chills. His mind, completely manipulated by Callie's lie about her pregnancy, slipped into the Fryer home through the prearranged open back door. In the dark, he moved with practiced ease every detail exactly as Callie had instructed. In her bedroom, Callie lay silently, waiting for the sound that would signal the end of Louis Fryer. She had already prepared her role as a shocked daughter who discovered the family tragedy, giving herself a solid alibi. Jerry took a knife from the kitchen knife block and crept into Louis's bedroom. The devoted father was in a deep sleep, completely unaware of the danger lurking. The first stab to Louis's neck jolted him awake, instead of dying instantly. Louis awakened and began the final fight for his life. A fierce struggle ensued in the dark room. Louis, despite being surprised and critically injured, fought back desperately during the fight. Jerry was also wounded on his hand, but he didn't stop, driven by the delusion of protecting his family that Callie had planted in his head. Jerry continued his brutal assault. Louis Fryer, The father, who had spent his life loving and protecting his children, finally fell after multiple stab wounds to his neck and back. His death was not just the end of a life, but the complete collapse of a family after Lewis stopped moving. Jerry carried out the rest of the script. He took Lewis's phone, wallet, car keys, and a cup of coins, staging the scene to look like a home invasion and robbery. These items were not just for covering up the real motive, but also to fund his escape. Jerry used Lewis's own car to flee, discarding the murder weapon along the way to destroy evidence. When the car was abandoned in Oklahoma City and Jerry disappeared into the night, his part was complete. Now, Caylee prepared to step into her most important role, an innocent daughter who had just lost her father in a mysterious crime. The next morning, Caylee's 911 call put the entire Guthrie community on alert about the tragic death of Lewis Fryer. Her voice, panicked and shaken, sounded completely genuine. On the surface, everything pointed to a robbery that had turned tragic. But experienced investigators quickly noticed some inconsistencies. There were no signs of forced entry on any windows or doors, and no evidence that the house had been ransacked for valuables. While Lewis's car was missing along with his wallet and some personal items, the truly valuable possessions, the TV, computer, and jewelry, were untouched. The scene looked like a robbery that was too selective and unnatural. As they widened the investigation into the Fryer family's life, a completely different picture began to emerge. Caylee's friends, when questioned separately, revealed her double-life wild parties with alcohol and drugs at home when Lewis was away, frequent truancy, and, most importantly, the secret relationship with Jerry Chills. The information about Jerry opened up a completely new line of inquiry. Police discovered that he had disappeared from his usual residence right after the murder, a detail too coincidental to ignore. The real breakthrough came when police found Caylee's journal in her bedroom. The handwritten pages revealed a shocking truth: the deep-seated hatred she harbored for her father. The entries weren't just the typical expressions of teenage rebellion, but revealed violent thoughts and a desire to escape Lewis's control. However, the decisive evidence came from the analysis of Caylee's phone records. This digital data completely shattered her alibi. Instead of sleeping soundly all night as she claimed, the record showed that Caylee had numerous calls and messages with Jerry during the critical hours. Specifically, there was a call from Caylee to Jerry just minutes before she called 911, proving she had been in contact with him before discovering her father's body. With the phone records and the discovery of the stolen car in Oklahoma City, tracking down Jerry Chills became easier. He was arrested on May 14, 2010, just one day after the murder, while attempting to flee. Initially, Jerry adamantly denied any involvement in the crime. He gave multiple conflicting statements, trying to create an alibi. But when agents confronted him with undeniable evidence, DNA traces at the scene, detailed phone records, and the use of the victim's car for the escape, Jerry's last layer of pretense crumbled. Jerry's confession was like a bomb, blowing up Caylee's entire plan. He not only admitted to killing Lewis Fryer, but also revealed in detail Caylee's role as the mastermind. Jerry testified that she had planned the entire operation, instructed him on every step, and most critically had used the lie about being pregnant to manipulate him. With this confession, the full picture of the crime became clear to the authorities. This was not a random home invasion, not the impulsive act of a teenager, but a meticulously planned conspiracy hatched by the victim's own daughter. Callie Fryer, the 15-year-old girl with an innocent appearance, now faced a first-degree murder charge for killing her own father, with Jerry Chill's detailed confession. The authorities had enough evidence to prosecute both the mastermind and the perpetrator. However, the path to the courtroom unfolded differently for each of them. Jerry, faced with an overwhelming amount of evidence and the undeniable truth of his actions, quickly realized that continuing to deny guilt was futile. His defense attorney negotiated a plea deal with the prosecutor that could help Jerry avoid the death penalty, the maximum sentence in Oklahoma for first-degree murder. In July 2010, Jerry officially pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and agreed to cooperate by testifying against Callie. In return, he received a life sentence instead of facing the possibility of execution. This decision not only saved Jerry's life but also ensured he would be the key witness in Callie's trial. Meanwhile, Callie and her legal team prepared a completely different defense strategy. They maintained her plea of not guilty, arguing that Callie was simply a victim of circumstances, a 15-year-old girl who was manipulated and exploited by Jerry. The defense emphasized that there was no direct forensic evidence linking Callie to the crime scene, and that Jerry's testimony could be unreliable because he had a motive to blame others to reduce his own punishment. However, the prosecution had built a strong case based on a chain of powerful circumstantial evidence. They had Callie's journal, which clearly showed her hatred for her father, phone records proving she lied about sleeping all night, and most importantly, Jerry's detailed testimony about the entire plan she had devised. The trial for Callie Fryer officially began in May 2011 when she had just turned 16. The atmosphere in the courtroom was tense, as a young girl faced the most severe charge the law could apply, first-degree murder of her own father. The prosecution began by painting a clear picture of Callie's double life. They presented how a seemingly innocent girl had hidden a rebellious lifestyle, how she had gradually nurtured her hatred for Lewis, and finally, how she had meticulously planned to eliminate the obstacle in her life. Callie's journal entries were read aloud in court, creating haunting moments of silence as everyone listened to the hateful words a 15-year-old girl had written about her father. The phone records were meticulously presented, with each call and message analyzed to prove that Callie had lied about sleeping all night and had in fact been coordinating with Jerry throughout the night of the crime. But the pivotal moment of the trial was when Jerry Chills took the witness stand as the one who had physically committed the murder. His testimony was decisive for Callie's fate. Jerry recounted in detail how Callie had approached and persuaded him, and how she had used the lie about being pregnant as a psychological weapon to turn him into a tool for her crime. She told me she was pregnant and that we needed to start our life together. Jerry recounted with a shaky voice. She said her father would never accept us and would do everything he could to ruin us. She made me believe this was the only way we could be happy. Jerry described in detail how Callie had instructed every step of the plan. The back door would be unlocked, the location of the knife in the kitchen, the order of items to be taken to create a cover-up for the robbery, and how to use Lewis's car to escape. He also admitted that it was Callie who had suggested killing Lewis, not him. Callie's defense team tried their best to undermine the credibility of Jerry's testimony. They argued that Jerry might be trying to shift blame to reduce his own responsibility, that he could have fabricated the story of being manipulated by Callie. they emphasized the age difference between Jerry and Kaylee, arguing that if anyone was manipulated, it was the 15-year-old girl. However, these efforts failed to sway the jury. The combination of evidence from the journal, phone records, and Jerry's consistent testimony created a compelling picture of Kaylee's guilt. Furthermore, her repeated lies during the investigation seriously damaged the credibility of her defense. The cross-examination of Kaylee revealed further contradictions in her statements. When asked about her relationship with Jerry, she claimed they were just friends. But phone records showed a much deeper relationship. When confronted with the entries in her journal, Kaylee tried to explain them as just temporary teenage feelings. But the level of detail and frequency of the hateful expressions made this explanation unconvincing. After several days of considering all the evidence, the jury delivered its verdict. Kaylee Fryer was guilty of first-degree murder. The moment the verdict was announced marked the end of one of the most shocking cases in Guthrie. Oklahoma's history and the beginning of the final chapter of the Fryer family tragedy. The guilty verdict from the jury paved the way for the sentencing phase, the moment that would determine Kaylee Fryer's fate. On July 15, 2011, the court officially sentenced Kaylee to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 45 years. This meant she would have a chance to be considered for release at age 61 in 2056. This sentence reflected the complex balance the court had to strike. On one hand, the serious nature of the crime, a daughter planning to kill her own father, demanded a severe punishment. On the other hand, Kaylee's age at the time of the crime, 15, was considered a mitigating factor, reflecting the hope that a young person is still capable of rehabilitation and social reintegration. Compared to Jerry Chills, who received a life sentence with no possibility of parole until 2077, when he would be nearly 90 years old, Kaylee was seen as having a better chance at a second life. This difference was based not only on age, but also on the court's assessment of their potential for redemption. However, the numbers of years cannot fully express the devastating impact the case had on the survivors. The Fryer family, once a symbol of love and togetherness, was now irreparably shattered. Keith Fryer, Lewis's eldest son, had to cope with a reality even more painful than losing his father, that his sister, the one he once loved and protected, was the one who took their devoted father's life. In public statements, Keith bluntly said that Kaylee deserves what she gets, showing his profound anger and disappointment. Yet, beneath that anger, a complex and conflicted family bond persisted. Keith still takes calls from his sister in prison, not because he has forgiven her, but because he believes it is what Lewis would have wanted. "My dad wouldn't want us to completely cut ties," Keith once shared, "no matter what she did. She's still my sister." The reaction of Tricia, Kaylee's mother and Lewis's ex-wife, was completely different. She adamantly refused to accept the truth of her daughter's guilt. In a mother's mind, admitting that the child she gave birth to and raised could commit such a brutal act was unbearable. Tricia still believes Kaylee is innocent, that she was coerced or manipulated, and that the justice system failed to protect a child. Tricia's denial of reality created another deep divide in the family, while Keith tried to face the truth and move forward. Tricia was mired in denial, creating two parallel worlds that could not intersect. More broadly, the Lewis Fryer case has become a painful lesson about many aspects of modern life. It shows that family conflicts, if not addressed properly and in time, can escalate into irreversible tragedies. Kaylee's story also illustrates the destructive power of psychological manipulation, especially when carried out by young people who can possess a surprisingly high level of calculation and deception. The case also raises profound questions about the role of technology in criminal investigations. Phone records became key evidence, showing that in the digital age, lies can easily be exposed through data. This has changed how crimes are investigated and prosecuted for the Guthrie community. The case left an indelible scar. This peaceful small town witnessed one of the most shocking crimes in its history, not by an outside stranger, but from within a family many admired. The incident shook people's faith in human nature and in their ability to truly know those closest to them. As the prison doors closed behind Kylie and Jerry, their story became a cautionary tale about how love can be twisted into hatred, how manipulation can turn the innocent into accomplices, and how decisions made in a single moment can determine a lifetime. Louis Fryer, the devoted father who spent his life loving his children, ultimately paid with his life for that love. His unconscious sacrifice was not just a personal tragedy, but a painful reminder that sometimes love is not enough to save souls consumed by hatred. The Louis Fryer case will forever be a dark stain on Guthrie, Oklahoma's history, a story of a family's collapse, the price of manipulation and hatred, and the irreversible consequences of wrong choices. It reminds us that sometimes the greatest dangers do not come from the outside, but from those closest to us